Whether you're a geek in a cape
Or a rogue who is sneaky.
join
Jason.
and Chris. If we can get through the intro of Entertain the Geeky. Guys.
Put me on the spot there.
I
was
did,
ready
I
for you
did.
to have to say my name right away.
Well, like, it felt natural to make the switch there because I'm like, I shouldn't say my name first, then I'm a prick, you know?
No, it's your show.
No, I mean, I guess.
This is not my show.
Fair enough, fair enough. But here we are, nonetheless.
Yes, we are here.
So, Roger's got some family stuff going on right now, so me and Jason are tackling the mics today.
Indeed.
And Jason gets here and he's like, what the fuck are we going to talk about? And I'm like, that's a good question. So we decided to go with what makes a good role-playing experience. Because Jason had a fun little...
Yeah, I mean, we played Deadlands last night, and I mean, I am personally, and I think this is point one for me of what makes a good role-playing experience, is I am personally very unfamiliar with the world of Deadlands. I've never really been someone who played it. Back in the day, me and my friends, if we weren't playing D&D, we were playing like Vampire or Werewolf.
Yeah.
Or some of the Worlds of Darkness games, because that's what we liked.
Yeah.
So we never got into Deadlands, so I didn't really know what to expect coming into Deadlands.
Mm-hmm.
And last night I was investigating, trying to figure out where this guy who used to be our friend but actually betrayed us and now has to die was going. And it led me to an under construction, for lack of a better term, a brothel.
Yeah.
That is run by vampires.
What?
Yeah, and so that's something like I'm playing in a game. It's very Wild West themed,
Yeah.
right? And then all of a sudden there's vampires, and that was a very out of nowhere thing. And I can't in the game, like, of course, me, Jason, I know what you're doing. That's a vampire.
Mm-hmm.
But Chavez, the character I'm playing in the game, he has no idea that it's a vampire.
Yeah.
He just knows that there's some monster escort woman who tried to kill him and is scared of the sunlight. He has no idea what that means, though. So for everyone else at the table, they know the world. They understood, right? I mean, they were shaking their heads as soon as I went in there. They knew what was going on immediately. I did not. So for me, the vampire thing came out of nowhere. So I think point one for me about making a good role-playing experience is how much knowledge do you have going into it? Do you know about the world? Because if you don't, you're actually in a much better position to be more
Exploratory.
in the moment and
Yeah.
surprised by the kind of things that can pop up.
Absolutely. I think the biggest thing is, I mean, for me anyway, is becoming engaged with just whatever, like you said, being in the moment, being engaged with what's happening right now.
Absolutely.
Because if you're not doing that, you start to, it takes away from the whole experience. You know what I mean? And that's when it's like, okay, now we're just some assholes sitting at the table talking, waiting to roll.
I mean, if I'm sitting and in a D&D game and the person who running the game is setting up a combat,
yeah,
right, and they're describing a monstrous thing, 9 times out of 10, before they get done describing that thing, I know what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
You're talking about an orc, or you're talking about a werewolf, or whatever it might be. And in this game, I have been genuinely surprised by the amount of horror-themed elements that are actually a part of this Wild West world. Mm-hmm. Because I was going in thinking it's a Wild West game.
Yeah.
And I was fine with that, right? He's using Deadwood, obviously the actual city, but he's basing it on, at least for his NPC portrayals, the show that HBO did, which I have not watched.
Okay.
So I'm not familiar with that. Actually, one of the other guys playing in the game just brought me the entire box set last night and was like, "You have to watch this because this is where we're playing." And I was just like, "Okay, I'll check it out. I like good TV."
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it really comes down to, like I said, just having genuine surprise at what's going on. What's really impressed me about this game the entire time is thinking I was going into a Wild West game and being very surprised at what it actually is.
You're like, there's vampires,
There's
and
vampires, there's
hookers,
undead,
and all kinds of crazy shit.
I mean, those things are, very Wild West, right?
Yeah.
The town of Deadwood, the fact that it's run by a criminal type guy, mafia guy, right? Like, it's the Wild West. Okay, I get that, but did not expect to see the supernatural aspect of it. Exactly. So yeah, I mean, I've really been enjoying the game from that aspect, but it's also, I mean, we're telling a really interesting story that's got a lot of layers. Like, going into last night, I thought what this session is we're going to hunt down that betrayer and we're going to kill him.
Yep.
And I've been looking forward to that for a month.
You've been talking about it. The last 2 times I've seen you, you're like, I'm going to kill this sumbitch.
And then out of left field, it's like, no, we're not doing that yet. Vampires first. It's like, but I really wanted to kill that guy. Like, I've been looking forward to killing that guy for a month. Yeah.
So, do you think it's better to go into the world ignorant?
I think it is. Yeah.
Do you?
Yeah, I think it definitely provides a more, like I said, you get real reactions out of people when you see them reacting to things that they weren't expecting, right?
That's very fair.
My reaction to vampires was, holy shit, are these vampires? Because I had no idea, right? Like, that was something that was new to me in this world.
Why? Because your character would have a feel for the world if that's the one that they've lived in. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But the genuine surprise thing, well, that's a little bit better for actually playing in the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's when you're in the sandbox, so to speak. You know what I mean? You're not like, oh, okay, so if we're here, that means these races and things and monsters can be present.
Absolutely.
So I think that's like so double-edged right there.
I mean, sure. I think a small part of what else makes, going in blind a very positive thing is just having no real expectation, right? Because everything we do, I mean, we're going to go to see this movie, or we're going to go to have dinner at this place we've never been to before. You have an expectation in your head of what you're going to get, right? When you go in completely blind with no expectations, it actually can heighten your enjoyment, not even just from a, engaging with the game perspective, but engaging with the other players.
Absolutely.
Who, in this case, like I said, all know the world.
Yeah.
And are in, kind of face palming when I walked into the brothel, knowing, holy crap, you're walking into a den of vampires. What's wrong with you? You don't even have backup. You're all by yourself.
That's hysterical.
But it's not like they can tell me that, because I did go off on my own to investigate this thing. So it's just like I said, you have no expectations, right? Having no expectations is not something that we experience a lot in our lives.
Yeah. Well, Roger ran a campaign for us years ago.
And he's running the Deadlands campaign that I'm playing in right now.
He actually does a good job as a DM. He ran a campaign for us, and it was D&D 5e, and aliens were fucking in it.
Well, sure. I mean,
spires are coming out of the sky. We'll come to find out we get onto one. It's a spaceship.
Yeah.
Everybody's reaction was like, holy shit. Like, it made for an exciting and very engaging experience. And somehow we get the spaceship in the air and crash it because, well, none of us have ever been on a spaceship before. None of us even knew that existed.
Right. So we have no idea what this is.
Yeah, it was awesome. Somebody killed an alien with a broomstick that he found in the janitor's closet. They went into the janitor's closet as though it were the armory.
Okay.
How would you know?
Because you wouldn't know.
How would you know? Sure. So you've got like this bucket, and you're like, fucking cool, man. Trash can
lid. I'm reminded of something similar. I was running a campaign that started out in the Underdark, and Brent, our friend Brent, was playing a Minotaur, and he had never seen the surface world before. All he'd ever known was the life of the Underdark. So when we first took him to the surface world, his role-playing reaction to the surface world was grabbing onto the nearest thing he could see, because he was worried that he was going to fall off the face of the earth into the sky, because he'd never seen the sky before, right? There's always been a cave sky.
Interesting.
Right. So his role-playing, and I think that's an interesting thing too, is what you're getting into, but you role-play it in a way that feels real.
Yeah.
Right? That makes it, I've never seen the sky before. I don't know what that is. So I grab onto this big boulder because I think I'm going to fall off this planet.
If you see birds flying in it, you're like, oh shit, they're falling through that. You know what I mean? Like, I can definitely see where somebody that was completely oblivious to this phenomenon.
Right. But I definitely think a good storyteller is a helpful thing.
Oh,
right?
for sure.
I've played in some really fun games that were due to, some really engaging storytellers. I mean, Brodeur is a perfect example, right? I mean, that man had me so into the story he was telling at one point. When another character playing in the game died, I cried actual tears.
Did you really?
That is how engaged that man had me in this story. And it's a credit to, the other person who was playing was Capuano. He was playing in that game, and he was the one who died. And so it was also a credit to him for making his character engaging and hooked in with the story as a whole. But yeah, I mean, that was the only time I think that's ever happened to me, playing a game that's not, because I'm usually the one running the game. That's kind of the role I've fallen into in my life. But when I get to play in someone else's game, it's interesting to see how sucked in I can get as a player.
Well, it's one of those super, all the role-playing games are like, it's a bizarre experience as a whole. Like, if you think about it, generally when we play a game, it's a tabletop game. You roll dice. There's a very, very clear set of rules that you have to follow.
Right.
And that goes right out the window when we're doing a role-playing game.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
it's like you're just alive there, and it's super fun. It's so weird because it's this meshing of what the DM is trying to accomplish, and then the characters getting it there.
Sure.
Like, whatever. It's so cool, man.
But so, I mean, as a larger theme of, right, like this question of what makes for a good role-playing session, I actually just recently had, and I've had this before, but most recently I ran a one-shot game for a friend of mine and his wife and their 3 children. Mm-hmm. And I will say one of the things that I think makes a really good role-playing game is good imagination and willingness to just go into the story without any preconceived notion of what it might be.
Yeah.
And the people who are the best at that are children.
100%. Children,
I mean, one of the things I noticed at the table just running that game is the children were the one asking questions. The children were the ones who wanted to know what was going on. The children were the ones that took the initiative when it came to attacking monsters, right? They're just more inclined to dive 100% into this story, in this narrative, right? Because they have it sucks, but as we get older, we lose some of that imagination.
No, we
right?
become so rooted in reality.
As we perceive the world around us and we start to form our own reality. We lose a little bit of the thing when you're a child where you can just have some toys in front of you and you can create a whole world for those toys right there in your head.
Right.
Right. I mean, I've seen it. I have siblings. You have children.
Yeah.
You've seen it where your kids or your brothers, your sisters can just be sitting there with their toys and there's a whole world. And if you ask them about that world, they'll tell you about it.
Oh, yeah,
right?
absolutely.
They will tell you what that world is that they just crafted in their brain for these toys.
Well, you know what's weird, too, is these worlds that, like, people create, you go into it knowing little things about it.
Sure.
But the world kind of reveals itself to you in a very peculiar way. It's not like, I just said it's this way, and because I'm the creator, right, it's this way. You'll go there and you're like, oh, maybe this is what's going on.
Yeah.
And I think that's so much fun. Like, that was one of when you were saying that reminded me of being a kid, and like you're playing with your action figures
my turtles
or whatever.
Or my Star Wars action figures.
Yeah, dude, I was all into the X-Men action figures. So
I had those too.
So I had like the X-Men 92 universe to kind of base things on.
Yeah.
But then I'm like, oh, dude, well, what if this is what's happening? And you get so sucked into that, and it's so cool.
You create your own narrative based on expectation, based on the look of what's going on, the look of the figures themselves. You just create your own world, and it's amazing.
It's the best.
And so I think one of my big things, and I've talked about this with Brodeur, is if I could find a way to monetize running games for children, man, I would do that in a heartbeat, because it's fun. It really is fun. I don't have to work as hard. The children are working hard. Right, they want to know about the world. They want to ask questions. And I, as a GM who has done this a lot and has taken the time on some occasions to build really complex worlds that are all fleshed out, that you could ask me anything about, I could tell you every detail about this world, only to have adult players not ask any questions about that at all, and completely ignore that as something that, and they don't know that I worked so hard. And I'm not mad that they didn't ask, but playing with children, no, they want to know. They want to feel like this world is real.
Why is that tree there?
Exactly.
Well, I think that's one of the things that we get so blindsided by, like, as adults, because you're like, no, I just got to get point A to point B. Like, that's all you really care about is, I got to get to the next stage, the next thing. Yeah. Instead of being like, well, why is the fucking sky blue?
Right, exactly.
Like, how did this happen?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's. I think that's a big one, right? Is people with good imaginations. It's a very big one. For me, what makes a game great.
The last game that I was like running was for Tara and the kids, and I'd actually done an episode and talked about that a little bit. But getting them to start role playing was kind of tough, and this is partially my fault. But Christopher was this rogue, total self-serving rogue, and he was role playing a totally self-serving rogue. He's like, meh, I don't want to go any further with this shit.
Sure,
like, I can stay here and loot some of this stuff, and I'll get plenty of money.
Right.
And I'm like, you're not in any way, shape, or form intrigued by glory and riches. He's like, well, how rich?
Right.
He's like, because if it's too risky, it's not worth it. And I'm like, oh, okay.
And this is a child.
This is a kid.
Mind you, anybody who's listening out there that doesn't know,
He's 10.
This is a child.
Yeah, I'm like, well, you have a very adult way of looking at this, but no, you need to do this, I think.
It seems like, though, at some point you probably explained to him what that class was, and he seems to have embraced that.
No, I totally did.
Yeah, as a reality, like, if I'm playing this class, well, this is how I'm going to play this person.
Well, as we were building his character, I was like, well, this is going to be the easiest for you to play. Like, I didn't want him to do, he's doing a rogue, so I'm like, I don't want to make you an arcane trickster because I don't want you to have to worry about spell slots or anything like that.
Yeah, kids to worry about magic, that's for sure.
So I'm like, we're not going to do that.
It's hard enough for adults.
Yeah, no shit. So I'm like, you're not doing that one. Let's do a thief.
Sure.
Like that or an assassin. And I don't want him to do the assassin because I'm like, I don't want you to be completely bloodthirsty at this point in time. Like,
right.
You need to be a sweet kid for a little bit longer.
Right.
So I'm like, you can be a little prick thief, I guess.
And then go kill people in Fortnite. Good job.
Yeah, right. Dude, parenting is hard. Parenting is hard. So, yeah, it took me a good minute to get them like sucked in, and it took an NPC to do it. Sure. And as I introduced this NPC, like he'd kind of popped up, and they didn't know who the hell he was or anything like that.
Sure.
I made him very mysterious at first, and it was when that character started like dancing around and singing and stuff that they were like, oh, this is fun. And I was like, yeah, you get to do this too. Do you want to dance with him? And they're like, yeah, fuck it, let's dance with him. We'll eat with him.
Yeah.
He's making dinner. We want to eat dinner with this guy because he's cool.
Well, and it took Rob's kids a little bit to get into that aspect of it. But right away when they walked into town, they a lot of people were giving them a wide berth. People were closing their windows. This was a town that had been plagued by vampirism for a while. Right?
Okay.
I was setting up. So if my friend wanted to continue running this story for his children, I set it up so he can use Curse of Strahd.
Yeah.
Right. So Strahd was kind of my villain. He was my basis for the story that I built around it. That kind of is a prelude to my own prelude to Curse of Strahd as a module.
Yeah.
Right. So it took them going into town and seeing the Gravedigger. Right. So they come upon this guy who's like shoveling dirt on a big hole, and as they get closer they realize, oh, it's a hole full of bodies.
Yeah,
there's a bunch of dead, right? It's not just one guy he's burying a whole bunch of people. And then as I had the NPC speak to them, and I gave him a personality. I mean, I'm very I turn into an actor when I run games, when I'm playing NPC characters. So then they were very engaged. But yeah, I mean, oftentimes it takes the game master to initiate that, at first. But then once I initiated that, I didn't have to do that anymore.
Yeah.
They were very inquisitive. They wanted to know where they could get more information. They wanted to know what was happening. How did these people die? All of this. I mean, they were asking about all the details, and it was great.
Yeah,
it was a really, really well done, kind of fun thing to see. And like I said, if I could find a way to monetize that, man, that'd be a hell of a job. That'd be a job I'd want to do for the rest of my life.
So Jason is now officially running D&D for kids, and you can contact him to ask about prices.
That's a whole thing. Well, that is a whole thing.
It's one of those things. It's like if I could just bottle this and have it in this bottle, like, to drink from anytime. How amazing would that be? And like,
yeah, I mean, I would have a good time. And honestly, I think it. Brodeur was talking about it, and he was like, he framed it as a babysitting service. Like, what if it was a babysitting service where you watched kids, and while you watched them, you didn't do the typical things. We didn't go to the park. We didn't play video games. We didn't do any of that. We played D&D, or we role played.
Yeah, your services are for date night for mom and dad. You guys go out, you have a nice time.
We're gonna go into the fantasy world for a little while. Yeah, I'm gonna foster that imaginative creativity that your kid has for a little while. We're gonna
slay a dragon tonight, okay?
Because obviously and I think this is another thing about, what we're talking about just what makes a good game, is a DM who really wants their players to succeed. Right? Is it my job to try to stop you from succeeding? Of course it is. That's one of the roles I have to play. Mm-hmm. But I don't want you to fail. I want you to succeed, right? Because I didn't sit here and craft this narrative for you so that you could die 5 minutes in and not experience it for what it is.
Yeah.
I want you to succeed. So there's a certain measure of knowing when to put the pressure on and knowing when to let up a little bit.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? When to let the players feel like they're super-powered heroes, and when to make them humble and go, oh, wow, that's a dragon. We should run.
We can't fuck with that yet. Right. We're level 2.
So I think that's another thing that makes a good game is a game master who understands and respects that boundary. Right?
I think you have to
know when to push and know when to back off a little bit.
Well, that was one of the things. So within 10-20 minutes of the game that I was running for Tara and the kids, Tara almost died because they had to cross a river, and she botched a fucking roll.
Yep, it happens. You can't be good at everything all the time.
That's what I'm saying. So I'm like, look, you kind of slip and fall in, and there's an undertow, you know,
and you start to drown.
Yeah, and she's like, holy shit, and the kids are failing at saving her. So then NPC has to come in, and he's like, shit.
Well, sure. There's again, and I think in that regard, right?
It's knowing
she failed, they failed. So you managed to make it back to the surface, and guess what? There's a tree branch. Roll me this real quick to try to grab onto it.
Yeah, you only got to roll a 5. Come on.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right. So that's on a DM to be able to improvise.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
Throw in like, okay, everyone's failing. I don't want you to fail here though. So let me find a way to help you succeed that seems natural.
Yeah, for sure.
Like it's a river. There's trees. It's a forest. There's a tree branch. Sure, you grab that tree branch and you manage to swim your way to shore.
Yeah,
with its help. You know what I mean? Like that's on a DM to know when to pump the brakes a little bit.
For sure. It's like, guys, we haven't even gotten to combat yet.
Right.
Like, well, so that's one of the things that I was going to ask you. So how important do you think combat is to a good role-playing experience? Because you can have a very, very immersive story going and never fight in it.
Oh, sure. There's plenty of sessions I run for the games I run for most of my adult friends where there are whole sessions where we don't fight a thing. It's a lot of role-playing. It's kind of setting up the world. Mm-hmm. And then the next session I balance that out by having it being more fight-centric. But I think with kids, it's important to show them both sides.
Oh, for sure.
Right? Because kids going in, you're starting with the role playing and they want to do that and they're getting into that. But they also know going in, before they even sit down and roll a single dice, I'm going to get to kill a monster.
We're fighting bad
guys.
Right?
That's why I have a big sword. Right? So if it's a monster, if it's a bad guy, it doesn't matter. I'm going to get to kill something with my big sword. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a part of you that has to include that depending on the audience you're running it for. Yeah. Otherwise, the game would seem boring.
For
right?
Sure.
Because they play video games, right? They play Fortnite and they play Call of Duty and they play Grand Theft Auto and all of these things where, yeah, there are cutscenes to watch and dialogue options to pick and have a conversation, but they're also then getting to pull out their gun and shoot the bad guy or whatever it might be. You know what I mean? So I think it's important, especially for a younger audience, to balance both of those things.
For sure. So
I had some role playing, a good amount of role playing. And then I had a good amount of fighting. They fought some zombies, they fought some ghouls, and then they fought a vampire. They fought Strahd. They fought Strahd von Zarovich. Now, they were never going to win that fight. That wasn't the point of that fight. The point of that fight that I used that final boss fight for was, because Strahd is a character like Dracula in most other things. He wants to die, but he never will.
Yeah.
He wants his suffering, his endless torturous life to end, but he never will. It never will. So he's constantly on the lookout for warriors who might be able to give him what he wants. Mm-hmm. So the story literally ends with him halting the fight and saying, you might be the ones. And then the mists come in, engulf the party, and when the mists clear, they're in Barovia.
Yep.
Which is where
Curse of Strahd
starts. Yep. Right? And that's literally the premise of the start of that game is you got caught up in the mists and you arrived in Barovia.
Yeah.
Whether you knew the people you were with or not, you guys got caught up in the mists, and here you are in Barovia. That's how the game starts.
For sure.
So I literally set it up so that he could continue running, and I think he's going to. I think he's already texting me and saying, well, how much money am I looking at to get the book, and some figures and some maps, and he's already asking those kinds of questions. So I think he's going to plan on continuing.
That's awesome.
To do it. So
well, it's so funny because like the first session that I did with Tara and the kids, I was like, we're not going to do combat this session. I don't think. It really just depends on how fast we progress in the story,
how deep you get in.
Exactly. And we didn't because they were kind of dragging their feet at first. I told you one of my players was like, no, this doesn't make sense to me. I'm staying here.
I don't care about this big adventure you've planned.
Yeah.
I'm a rogue.
I'm looting. Okay. It's pillage time. Let's go.
Right. Now I'm going to go have a drink.
Exactly. So he's, off. He's like trying to do his own thing. And like the other characters are like, I don't know. This is kind of scary. Like, because I had the city get fucking, like, just blasted, and everybody thinks it's a dragon right now.
Sure.
So they're like, dude, the fucking first thing that happens is we're here, like, we just got done on an adventure, and we're getting nuked. Like, what the fuck, dude?
Right.
We can't do anything about that. We're cool. We're gonna hang out. No, you're fucking not. Because the king knows you're good.
Sure.
He knows you're good.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, by the way, the king's dead. His kid knows you're good.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, you want your players to engage in the narrative and move forward with it, but sometimes it takes time to hook them in. And I think the biggest misconception that I see, or the biggest, I don't say misconception, I guess I should say the thing that I think keeps most people from trying it or playing in general is they just feel silly pretending to be someone else.
Yeah.
So one of the things I always tell people, and I think this is a measure of a good game as well, is to make sure your players understand, look, if it makes you uncomfortable to be someone else, be you.
Right.
Your character can just be you in this world. It doesn't have to be somebody else. You don't have to come up with a big elaborate backstory. You don't have to do any of that. The life experience that you have in your real life could be life experience that you share in common with the character you're playing. You don't have to change that. Use it.
Well, like typically...
Let your motivation be, it's you.
Well, typically speaking, like for me, I've generally taken on a character that had a similar temperament to myself because it makes it easier to get into the role playing, and it makes it easier to get the people at the table to engage with you because I'm not too off the wall. Like, this is pretty normal.
Well, sure, but I've also sat at tables with people, with a whole group of people that everyone's taking on a different persona.
Oh, no, and that's
like,
amazing.
Look, this is a character that does not represent you at all, because I know you.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's not you.
You're not that awful. Like,
and I am definitely the kind of person that whether I'm creating an NPC as the game master or whether I'm creating a character in the game, I'm always creating somebody that has a different life experience than me. Because I like to role play from someone else's perspective. So like I said, the character I'm playing in the Deadlands game right now, he is a Native American at a time when it wasn't
cool to be that.
Yeah, it wasn't okay. And he's also part Mexican, which is also something that, again, at the time, we're not a respected class of people. We're downtrodden, and we're, forced off of land that they themselves had held for centuries of their ancestral life. You know what I mean? So it's interesting to go into a world and look at the world from someone else's perspective. And that's what I think role playing for me, that's when I think it works best, is when you can look at the world from someone else's perspective.
Well, it's funny because that can like really shift how you view the real world.
Exactly.
It can make you more empathetic and stuff like that, which is really cool.
When we played the Dragon Age role-playing game, I played an elf.
Did you?
The elves are the downtrodden in the Dragon Age world. They're the second-class citizens in the Dragon Age world. But I wanted to play a character with that perspective.
Well, it's funny because Tyr's playing a Dragonborn. And I'm like, you don't really know people. And you're kind of...
ostracized.
Yeah, you're not normal.
Yeah, one of Rob's sons, I don't remember which one of them was playing a Dragonborn.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things, like I went through and I broke down everybody's species and character choices right at the beginning to let them know motivation, right? Like, you're a Dragonborn guy. You look like a dragon. You walk like a man, but you look like a dragon. You have scales. You have a dragon face. You're a monster. You know what I mean? Like,
when people haven't really seen you.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, this is a freak thing. Yeah.
Yeah. It was the same. I think it was Rob, who was playing a drow, and I was explaining to him, like, this is the surface world, man. You're just not somebody who would be walking around, and especially would be able to go into a normal city.
Right.
Right. I was like, you're lucky. This city that I've prepared for this game is already under such duress because of vampirism. They're ready for anybody who says they could kill the vampire to come in and take this curse away from them.
Right.
I was like, but most cities would not welcome you. Drow are mostly evil. And they're considered, they're racially outcast in most of the Forgotten Realms world.
For sure.
You can't just walk into a city. They're immediately going to be on you. Get out of here, Drow. Yeah.
I mean, the Drow are kind of douchey.
Just like orcs.
Yeah.
Orcs can't just walk into Silvery Moon. That's not how it works.
It's true. It's very true. You stay the fuck out, orcs.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's an interesting way of giving people that concept. Well, and it's so funny because like I've played an elf a bunch, and just regular D&D.
Yeah, I do elves a lot as well.
And elves they've always been pretty high class. Like they're really old, they're really nice. Sure. And getting to kind of play on the other side of that coin is a lot of fun too. No, I'm not the one that everybody likes. Most people actually. They just don't want to be around you because you're kind of funny looking.
Sure, yeah.
You're too short. You know what I mean?
Yeah, dwarves, hobbits,
Exactly.
Gnomes.
No, I was going to say, I took on a gnome for one of my last characters that I had played as, and I was like, this is weird but cool.
Yeah, gnomes are weird.
Oh, they're so bizarre. They're
like
bizarre.
Technologically advanced, but they're also very secretive.
Yeah,
like they're weird. They're a weird race.
they are, and I played a gnome bard at that, so it was like,
oh man,
so super off the wall. Exactly, super off the wall.
You're a sing-songy gnome.
I was, and I did this awful voice for it too, and hi, you know.
Oh my God, what are you?
I had to.
What are you, one of the Keebler elves? Like, what is that?
Had to be. He's little. And I wanted it to be fun, so I would try to write songs before going into a session so I could pull them out. You know what I mean? Like, you got to be able to pull your song out and sing it.
The ballad of whatever.
Yeah. And this is the time when we fell down this hole. You know what I mean?
Oh my God, I don't know if I could do that. I don't know if I could do that.
Well, that character was going to be the one that I was doing in Dungeons and Dumbasses.
Oh, good.
Nomfoodle, yes.
That would have been annoying.
Hysterical. You know how hard it is to find a fucking gnome bard miniature? That was difficult. Yeah. Super difficult.
Well, I mean, but in all reality, I mean, any gnomish figure I think could work.
Oh, yeah. No, it totally could. Well, I wanted him to have a guitar. Like, it was this just obnoxious
but again, you're probably not going to find a gnome fig with
a
lute.
Look, I had this so specific in my brain that I was like, this sucks. I can never find this character. So then I just start finding, like, fucking halflings and shit, and I'm like, I guess this will work.
Well, you got those places now that do...
like Hero Forge and stuff.
Yeah, that, like, let you design it yourself and then 3D print it.
The fuck you want.
Yeah, so you can make a gnome bard.
No, for sure. Well, this whole character, he was a rock star. In his own mind.
Sure.
So
I don't think rock star was a thing, but
it wasn't.
I mean, you were a traveling minstrel.
It's exactly right. But he was doing it. He was living that life, touring and whatnot.
All right.
So, yeah, no, but it's super fun to like when you start to get swept up in that character that you've made, and you really, really, really get to play hard in that world. I think it's the best.
Well, I think that's also something that makes a good game, right? Is someone who really goes into making the character their own.
Oh, for sure.
Giving it a voice, and even if that voice is just your voice, it's fine.
Yeah.
Right. But giving a voice to that character, bringing that character to life. So yeah, I think overall. There's a lot of good things. There's a lot of things that can make a good role-playing game. I don't think we've nailed down any definitive answers. We've kind of just been riffing about it.
Get into it.
Right, well, get into it. I mean, it is something that I think, like I said, a lot of people can't get past the goofy nature of it, but I mean, it's fun. It's definitely something. I mean, if any part of you has ever enjoyed a fantasy setting on television or in the movies like Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones, or really The Witcher, right? Really any of these things that do the fantasy setting. If you enjoy that, well, that's what D&D is, guys. Yeah. It's a fantasy setting. It's a setting with magic and dragons and monsters and wizards and sword fights. And I mean, that's what it is. So if you like those things, you would probably like this thing. I mean, imagine putting yourself in Geralt's shoes. And I know, you say, oh, you can go do that on a video game.
It's not
the same thing.
Not the same at all.
It's not the same thing.
Well, in a video game, you're still observing from the third person.
Right. I mean, I guess in a first-person game, you can kind of put your own personality on the character.
Yeah.
And then there's even some third-person games that I think intentionally leave the character vague enough that you can kind of apply your own sensibilities and personality. I mean, Link's always been a character that I think he doesn't say a word.
Yeah, he's a blank slate enough.
Yeah, he's a blank slate. You can kind of just, put your own ideas about the world and the game into it. But yeah, Geralt has a personality.
Yeah.
I mean, he's you can control what he says in conversation, but he's got pre-programmed responses. You get to pick one.
Yeah.
This is what
he would say. Are you going to say A or B?
All right, these are the things he would say. Pick one.
Yeah. So, is there anything that you think players should avoid in order to make a more players or DMs should avoid doing in order to make a more immersive experience?
Well, I think the DM thing we went over, right? It's all about balance. It's all about knowing when to push and knowing when to
you don't want to just go and shit on people,
right? But from a player's perspective, I think one of the things that always trips players up, right, is letting all of those choices you make at the beginning of the game dictate how you play the game, right? Yeah, you picked your class. Yeah, you picked your alignment. You picked your spells. Mm-hmm. But maybe as you start playing the game, you realize that doesn't define who you are. I think you gotta take yourself off of the page sometimes and just be in the moment.
Well, yeah, it's character development.
That's a problem. I think that's a problem that players have. They get into this idea of what would my character do.
Fair enough.
But it's not what your character do. What would you do? Right? Because that's who you're the character.
Yeah.
Right? So if you're looking at the page and thinking, I'm a neutral good, or I'm a lawful good paladin of blah, 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 what would he do? No, you're him. So even if you would do something that doesn't fit within that mold, well, you can adjust that as you go. Alignments can shift. It doesn't have to stay what it is when you write it down. That's why you write in pencil. Nobody's writing in pen, and I think people say, oh, that's because, we're going to change the scores and we're going to change the numbers. No, sometimes that can mean you're going to change your alignment or you're going to change your class. Yeah, you're going to go in a different direction.
You had this great epiphany. Okay.
Right. While you were playing the game. So I think, like I said, it comes down to, don't ask what your character would do. Ask what you would do. If you, Chris, were facing a dragon with a sword and shield in your hand, what would you do?
Yeah.
Don't think about what the guy on the page would do. Think about what you would do.
Yeah, how big is this dragon? That's the first question I'm asking.
Ancient dragon. Yeah, old dragon.
And I'm by myself?
Yep.
I'm fucking leaving.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. My happy ass is going to hope that he didn't see me or smell me.
But maybe if you got trapped into that looking at the page thing, you might think, well, my character would draw his sword and go into battle, right? But that's the trap, right? Don't worry about what your character would do. Worry about what you would do.
And then as a DM, we did pretty well cover that. Pump the brakes sometimes, or
I think
give it some gas.
Right. There are times when your players will feel like superheroes and are, when you're looking at how the battle is progressing, they pretty much are superheroes. So sometimes maybe hold on to that big super spell for the end when you've gotten them, lured them into this place where they feel like superheroes, and then right as the battle's about to be drawn and over, hit them with the big giant thing to make them humble a little bit at the end and go, you know what? He almost killed us.
We were pretty badass for a second there, but it didn't keep going that way.
It went our way for a little while because, like you said, it's all about dice rolls, and you can't do good every time. Sometimes you just do really bad.
Well, I think the dice rolls are like the one thing that's the equalizer, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's one of those things that's so much fun. Like, you have stats, and it's just like being a normal person.
Right.
There's shit that I'm pretty good at. Sometimes I even fuck that up.
Right.
And you sure as shit wouldn't.
I'm pretty good at climbing a mountain, but every now and again I'll slip and fall.
Right. Right. And that's really what it's.
It can't be good all the time.
It's like that in D&D. I know it's more swingy, but it's a story, and it's you're not doing that every second of every day, so it has to be swingy and it has to be crazy and climactic, and it's.
But I think at the end of the day, try it. I mean, it is a game that I think more people would find that they would enjoy if they would get past what societal taboos have been placed on it and just give it a try. Because no matter what world you want to be in, right? You don't like the fantasy world? Guess what? There's all kinds of worlds.
Yeah, play fucking vampire.
There's vampire, there's all the White Wolf stuff, the Worlds of Darkness stuff, there is the end of the world stuff with the zombie apocalypse and the machine apocalypse and the singularity and the robot uprising.
Those are all fun too.
And the return of Cthulhu, and there's all kinds of different worlds. I mean, I'm playing in a world right now in Deadlands that is the Wild West, but it also has horror monsters in it.
Yeah.
Undead and stuff, There's all kinds of worlds. I think if you've ever been inclined to try something, try it, because you'll find something that you'll enjoy.
Well, and I'll play devil's advocate here a little bit because maybe you would like to try one, and maybe you don't know where to start. There's a local game shop somewhere. I promise you. And
they're all over the place.
That's a ground zero for you.
Yeah.
Go in there.
Most game stores do role-playing nights.
They do. Yeah. Almost all of them have a D&D night.
Yeah.
And
I mean, D&D definitely. But I've known some that even do, other games.
No, for sure.
Role-playing nights.
For sure.
Yeah.
Starfinder's one that's like, that's pretty
Sci-fi
popular
Pathfinder.
now. Exactly. Yeah. Super cool. But like go to your local game shop, go in and ask somebody there, hey, how do I get started?
Right.
Is there a group that I can get in? Because you can find one. I promise you.
Yeah. There are other people that like this stuff too and are in the same boat as you.
And you might even be able to trick a friend to go with you if you're too scared to go by yourself.
Trick a friend to go with you. Don't deceive your friends.
I'm not saying deceive them, but you can be like, hey, we're going to go play this really great game. And if they don't have to necessarily know what it is. And then you end up rolling characters and they're like, oh, this is kind of fun. I get to be creative.
Right. Exactly.
So Yeah, just try it.
Yeah.
Try it.
I think it's worth trying.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that can pretty much wrap this one up.
Yeah.
I think that's a good spot.
Yeah, I mean, everybody, don't forget, we are launching the Kickstarter for Conniving Cooks on the 5th of May. Yeah, we were going to do it on the 4th, but then we didn't want to compete with Star Wars Day, so the 5th seemed like a better day.
So we're going to do it on Cinco de Mayo.
Oh, yeah, Cinco de Mayo. Damn, I forgot all about that.
Yeah.
I don't celebrate Cinco de Mayo. I don't drink.
I don't drink either.
Holiday.
It is a drinking holiday.
I forgot all about the drinking holiday. But we are going to launch it.
It's happening. It has to.
I have started communicating with some of the people from Geekway to the West. We're going to try to get set up with the Kickstarter table. So I don't know if that's going to happen, but we're hopeful.
Yeah.
I'm emailing right now, so we're going to figure that out as we get closer. Also, just to mention it, our good friend Mike Brodeur is put a lot of his money and effort into becoming a gaming journalist, and he's launched a website and a business called the Influence Foundation. Their motto is "We are everywhere," which I think is, if you know Brodeur, is a completely appropriate motto for him. The website is goinfo.org. There's not much there yet, but he's getting ready to launch it in full, heading out to Gamma with his press pass and going to get some interviews, and we're rooting for him.
Yeah, super amazing.
Keep that on your radar for the future. Also, you can link to our friends Matt and Jeff.
Board Game Bros.
The Board Game Bros. They're brothers. They play board games. They talk about board games.
And they're
and they create board games.
Yeah, I was going to say, with EG Games, like we have a pretty tight-knit thing with them.
Yeah. And you can find their podcast on the podcast page at entertainthegeeky.com.
Yeah, and on entertainthegeeky.com, you can follow us on all of our social media.
Yeah.
You can read articles, all kinds of goofy shit there. We're trying to be the one-stop shop for all the nerdy stuff now.
I mean, I've tried. We got video games, we got comic books, we got movies, we got television, we got board games, we got role-playing games. It's a lot. It's a lot to keep track of.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, and then we had Scott Sampson for a little bit that was just doing his...
the music articles, the bits of everything.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't always music. It was just, he would just choose a topic and just
he wanted
go with it.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, it was great.
Super cool. So yeah, you can go there if you want to read some interesting shit. And there's going to be more coming here in the future, and we're super excited for what the future holds.
Absolutely.
So guys, as always, stay geeky.